And so I'm curious now, as a government teacher during an election year, so how do you handle, I'm sure you get students that are like, well, my vote doesn't count. Why am I even voting? Why does this matter?
Yeah, what's so good when I get that one, I always say, okay, so who uh, who would you want to win the election? What do you think of the current administration? And usually, if it's a student of color, they're like, "Oh my God, I hate it. I don't like it. He's crazy." Da, 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 da. And I say, "Okay, so you do understand by not casting a vote, you are casting a vote for the person that you don't want. Because the person who doesn't vote, there are other people who are voting. So there's no way your candidate can win if you don't cast a vote."
That's true. That's true.
So by not voting, you really are voting. You're voting for the other person. So yes, your vote does count.
Absolutely. And what do you tell them when they're like, well, I don't like either candidate? How do you get them to understand you're not going to get a perfect candidate?
Right. So I'm saying you don't like either candidate. Well, let's think about what will happen if you get candidate A in the next 4 years and what could possibly happen with candidate B in the next 4 years. So of those two, which one do you want more? Because you're going to get one of them. So you want to cast your vote so you can get one of those two options, even though neither is optimal for you, because it's going to happen with or without you. And without you, it's more likely that the thing that you don't want to happen is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I learned something on a live feed recently for Hispanic Heritage Month where the speaker said, think about who you're voting for, who can't vote, whose voice are you representing? And I think about my DACA students. I think about people that are here undocumented that are not considered legal citizens. Mm-hmm. And they need someone to speak for them and voice and vote and make sure that we have people in place that are looking out and helping them. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's not just me casting a vote, it's me carrying other people that don't have that ability.
Right. And, I think for the current generation, because it's like the civil rights era, it feels so removed for them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people always say, people die so you could have the right to vote. How could you not vote? And
this is like me in class.
People who are in like in their teens and 20s, they're thinking, well, that's something in a history book. What does that have to do with me? Yeah, so while it is absolutely true that people died for their right to vote, we have to talk about something that is more tangible to them, because they can't touch and feel that. That's something in a history book. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately. But I think, this is a good time to be able to make that connection, because things that are happening now, you can see a parallel that it has happened before. And yes, people died and fought so that it wouldn't happen again. And here it is happening again, right? Mm-hmm. So, you just kind of have to make that parallel so that students today can see how what happened in the past is trying to repeat.
Yeah. Absolutely. Or I ask my students, do you know of anyone in politics that you feel like is representing you? Do you see yourself being mirrored, or do you see people advocating for the things that your community needs or wants? And if not, that's something to consider. Mm-hmm. But I do, as a history professor, like a lot of my students don't know about what women went through, or I should say specifically white women went through to get the right to vote, and yet women of color were still marginalized. And it's like, just for me to, and you and I, to even be able to say we are professors and have education and be invited to the table. The same argument was used of, well, your husband's vote counts for you as well. And it's that same question, well, does it,
Right. Yeah, it's always interesting too, government and history intertwine so much.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Whenever we're talking about redlining or talking about trying to make purchases. There was a time when a woman could not have a credit card. A woman could not have a bank account. A woman could not write a check. And students are always like, what? Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, you couldn't drive. You couldn't be out by yourself as a woman.
And it wasn't that long ago.
It was not that long ago. And a lot of it changed because of the passing of the 19th Amendment. And then, that's a whole nother story. But yeah. So people fighting the right to vote, then casting a vote. So there are things happening now. In order to change it, we need to vote interest and try to change it, because that is the system that's in place. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. You have to work through the system that is in place until.
Absolutely. And we certainly saw that after the 2016 election. Maybe not everyone was happy with who became the president, but it galvanized another generation of people to get involved in politics and to run for positions of office. And so, I look at that as hopeful. Like, we have more women now running in politics. We have more candidates of color also thinking about other communities, other perspectives that we need to bring to that table. That is so important. Let's see. Oh, did you cut out? Can you see me? Okay. So with the time that we have left, let's talk a little bit about the debates, or specifically last night's debates. I think my students are curious about your impression of that. And one of my students asked me a really great question, like, why should we care about the vice presidential debate? Why is that important? And I just thought, as a government professor, do you have some insights or things you want to share about that?
The person running for president chooses their vice presidential running mate is for a couple of reasons. One would be they're trying to find someone who is an expert in an area that they may have weaknesses. So that helps to make their ticket stronger. They need to find somebody that complements their skills and abilities that makes their ticket look strong against the opponents. And then another reason could be they're trying to get a voting block that they think they may or may not get. So they're going to get somebody who will pull that voting block with them. So for instance, when John McCain chose Sarah Palin, well, he thinks I'm going to get women, right? Like, well, you really need to vet the person that you're adding to your ticket.
The soccer moms of Alaska, or the hockey moms of Alaska.
Right. And then the person that Hillary Clinton chose, I'm not sure.
I couldn't remember either. Like, who was her? Does anyone remember?
The man, I don't remember his name. Isn't that horrible? Because I didn't know.
I know. I feel the same way. I'm like, does anyone? Yeah.
Right. It's like, and that was a missed opportunity. It's like, that was a missed. But anyway, that's.
If we can't even remember who they are now. Yeah.
And then, so with Donald Trump, President Trump choosing Pence, the Christian right, that is a huge voting bloc. Huge.
Yes, it is. It is a huge voting bloc. Yeah.
He has the support of the Christian right. So with Joe Biden choosing Kamala Harris, he probably of the two candidates was more likely to get the black vote between him and Donald Trump. But this kind of solidifies it, and he gets to pull in women because she's a great representative of women as well. And so that helps to make his ticket stronger against the Trump ticket. So that's usually when you're thinking about listening to vice presidents, you want to hear what are they bringing to the table? How are they going to complement the president? Because they have a role to play. And then also, they could potentially become the president if something happens to the president.
That's true. And they are the oldest candidates we've ever had. I thought Reagan was, but they're older now that I realize.
Yeah. So that's why it's good to listen to them, because you'll get an idea of if something happens. Let's say something happened to President Trump before the election. Mm-hmm. Pence is going to be the president. It may only be for 30 some odd days. Well, it'll be more than that because it has to go through January. But he becomes the president. Mm-hmm. If Joe Biden wins and something happens to him, Kamala Harris becomes the president. Yeah. So that's why it's important to listen to how they are representing themselves. And what I thought about the debate last night, it was much better than the presidential debate. Heads and tails. What I didn't like that of the questions that were asked, they probably only answered 3 or 4 of the specific questions that were posed. I did not like that at all. If you're in a debate, answer the question, and then if you want to go back, go back. Mm-hmm. So that was very frustrating for me. It's like, answer the question and don't completely ignore it. There was some that they completely ignored. It's like, okay, did she not ask that question?
I like to call it, it's like a political dance. It's like listening to a salesman. They're very good at dancing around the thing you want them to actually answer.
Right.
And I grew up, my father was a businessman. I mean, he could sell you your own grandmother to you. I mean, it's, so when I hear that kind of rhetoric, I'm just like, yeah, but you're not really answering what's being asked.
Right.
And they want you to get pulled and distracted by all of that over there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you had the fly on the head too, so I always find the comic relief.
Yeah. I mean, that's their role. They're trying to sell their ticket.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I understand that, sell your ticket, but also sell your ticket by answering the questions, and selling your ticket by answering the questions. Be responsive. Learn how to work in whatever it is you want to say in your answer. Don't throw out some answer that has nothing to do with the question that was asked. It's like, what is wrong with you people? I mean, again, we got to hear some information because they weren't totally screaming over each other, even though the vice president, he overtalked her a couple of times, and then a couple of times she overtalked the moderator. And it's like that. They need to get better moderators. That's all I have to say. Get a moderator.
Yeah, like cut them off.
And cut them off. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it also, I was listening to some of the commentary. It is something that as professional women, and I'm sure maybe you face that. I know I face it in my meetings that I attend, that sometimes the men will try to talk over. And I have learned, and I do it now, I don't even think, I just interrupt people. I just cut them off. But I've had to be that way because I worked in a predominantly male field where if you don't get your voice in there, you're just going to be pushed to the side. And I see, especially with my female students, a lot of them are so quiet and reserved. And it's like, you have to fight your way in.
You do.
Not everyone's going to wait and say, oh, okay, Rolanda, what do you think? No, that's
right.
That's not the reality.
Yeah. And even, if you're in where it's male dominated, and then you're going to have women who have adapted to that. And so they're making sure that they get their point across. So yeah, if you don't jump in there, your voice will never be heard. It will never be heard. So,
and I always think of our predecessor, Dr. Kathy Yates, or Professor Yates. I mean, she in a way was my hero in that she was not afraid to just say what she meant, and she had a way of commanding the room.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when I'm in a situation, I'm like, what would Kathy Yates do in this situation?
Right, definitely. She's definitely a strong advocate.
Very. Yeah. Love her or not love her, I mean, I had to admire her chutzpah, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, we need more of that. And we have to encourage our especially our female students, that you've got to be able to speak up. Who cares if they think it's rude or aggressive or,
Yeah, just like, hey, if it's not rude for you to do it, it's not rude for me to do it. And even our male students, especially our Black male students and our Hispanic male students, they're going to look at you a certain way just because. So you can't worry about that.
Yeah.
Make sure that your voice is heard,
exactly.
And always try to do it in a respectful manner so that they can't say, well, you were not. Like, no, I calmly stated what I had to state, and you responded in a negative way.
Yeah.
So what's your answer?
Okay, and then one of my ALICE officers had some great questions. She said that can you kind of explain a little bit what they were talking about, the court packing, that they kept criticizing each other, but she didn't fully understand what that was, and I wanted some more insight on that too.
So what they're referring to, they're claiming that the Democratic Party, and therefore Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, if they win the ticket, that they are going to move to extend the number of Supreme Court justices so that they can then nominate and get passed through the Senate nomination process enough justices, liberal justices, to have more liberal justices on the Supreme Court than the Republican justices. Oh. So that's what they mean when they say packing. They're saying, so it's been 9 for years, over 100 years. And so their claim is you're trying to change that history so that you can come in and bring in all of these liberal judges so that you will have more liberal judges on the Supreme Court to make rulings for the country based on a liberal viewpoint. So that's the claim. Now, it's not going to happen, even if that's they wanted to do, because it's government. We have 3 branches of government. The executive branch comes say, oh, we're going to change the judicial branch. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Those were just good talking points.
And I know from history, FDR in the 30s tried to do something like that similar, and it didn't work. He kind of pushed a little too far with all the changes. So it's not unheard of in history, but yeah, good luck getting that.
Yeah. But you have to get, even if they propose something like that, it has to go through Congress. And then if it makes it through Congress, somebody can challenge it and it will go to the Supreme Court. Yes. And those 9 people can say, no, based on the Constitution, this is how we read it, and you can't do it. So it's a process. Yeah, it's not just Joe Biden wins and all of a sudden, we're going to add 5 more. And even if that part happened again, they'd still have to get the 5 people that he nominated through the Senate process. The Senate nomination process, they still have to approve the person. Yeah. So it's not as simple as they were trying to make it last night.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Dr. I could keep talking to you all day. I've got like maybe 40 seconds left before we get cut off. The time goes by really fast. But thank you so much for being on here and for being so generous with your time and your insights. And I hope some of my students will take your government class. Everything you're doing is just amazing. And yes, we can't wait to collaborate with you guys again.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I love working with all of us. I mean, the last thing we did together, When They See Us, it was a huge success. And the students wanted to do it again. And then coronavirus happened. And so that, but I thought,